Hey, my name is Bill. Welcome to the channel. We're just here to keep it simple and make it make sense. Okay, so the next thing I get asked about a lot is morality. Obviously, I teach an ethics class. I've been teaching that class for a long time. People ask me about ethics. Ethics really can be traced back, once again, as I talked previously about other topics, can trace back to morality. So what is morality? Well, first of all, let's say this. And some of my very good friends and deep thinkers, per se, we've discussed this ad nauseum. And a lot of times people will say, well, morality is relative. And I'm going to start off by getting your attention by saying, absolutely not, it's not relative. I don't think it is relative. Here's why. Bear with me. Give me a second, would you? All right, just hang tight. You're going to want to hear this. I think you're going to want to hear this. So first of all, we got to establish one thing, and that is patterns do not exist, repetitive patterns do not exist by coincidence. Anybody disagree with that? Everybody agree? In other words, if you see a repeated pattern of history, okay, laws of physics, laws of conservation, laws of nature, conservation of energy, conservation of water, those laws have existed and they're proven again and again and again. If I drop a pencil, boom, gravity, 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 gravity. We can do it again and again and again until things change. Anytime we see a pattern, we must give the benefit of the doubt to the fact that that pattern does not exist by coincidence. So, if we take then the pattern of human history, of human behavior that we have recorded, and by the way, as you know, I think humans have been around a lot longer than we think. Matter of fact, there's now a lot of evidence to suggest that man was far more advanced 15,000 years ago or 13,000 years ago prior to the Younger Dryas event than we previously thought. However, here we go. If we look at the pattern of human behavior, all cultures, all ethnicities, all societies throughout history, and we average those behaviors. Now you're saying, well, how do you average behaviors? Yeah, you're right. You can't really average behaviors. But bear with me, would you? Figuratively speaking, we take the behaviors of all people for all times. Some would say, I object, Your Honor, that's impossible to speak on behalf of the behaviors of, yeah, come on. All right, give me a break. Give yourselves a break here. If we take the average, recorded or not, with atrocities, we look at every country in Europe. We know what happened in Germany in World War II. Those are atrocities. But if you think about it, over the course of a few thousand years, that's still a small amount of time in the history of that nation or this nation. The United States of America, every country out there today, there are probably small atrocities. But if we take the average behavior of what people thought was right, what people thought was wrong, we can't deny the fact that we see a pattern. When we take a look at what all the people have said is wrong or immoral, taking life without consent, for instance, everybody said that's wrong. Now keep in mind, I got to stop for 1 second. What about self-defense? You know why self-defense is not immoral? Because there's consent, huh? What do you mean there's consent? Well, I'll tell you what. If you're coming at me and you're saying you're pointing a gun that you're going to shoot me, you know full well, or let me reverse the roles. I'm coming at you saying I'm going to shoot you with this gun or I've got a knife. I know full well that if it looks like I'm going to take your life or kill you, of course, which I'd never do, never take the life of an innocent person without consent. But if I was going to do that, I have to realize that my life could be taken as well. I could lose my life. I mean, I've consented that I too may die, right? I mean, you have to be delusional to not think that, I'm not going to die. I mean, you have to literally be in la-la land to not understand the fact that if I come at you to take your life with a gun or knife or a weapon or even hand to hand, I know full well if I'm going to punch you, for instance, a little easier example here, that I punch you, I might get punched back. And if I just sit there and deny the fact that could happen, then again, I'm delusional. Therefore, as I said previously, taking life without consent. So I've consented to die. When I enter into a conflict at that level, I have consented to die. So back to again, throughout history, we've concluded that boom, 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 boom. All these things are immoral. They're wrong. Wrong also synonymous with immoral. Some things are amoral. Things that are moral, immoral, or amoral. Now, what I've concluded is this. When we look at the common denominators of all these things. I think you've come to three things. I think you can define morality in three ways. And as far as I know, I've learned a lot from people over the years, a lot of other scholars, some of the greatest philosophers of all time. But this one's mine. I think I own this one. And that is, number one, that morality or immorality can be defined in three ways. Number one, it ultimately and only causes harm to oneself or another. Now, the ultimately only part, I'll come back to that. Number two, compromises the purpose of life, which I think is overwhelmingly obvious. And number three, obstructs human choice and self-control. Now, I can't just say that without now defining all three of them. Number one, ultimately and only causes harm to oneself or another. The key is ultimately and only, and we can't know ultimately and only without a crystal ball. Oh, well, there you go then. Well, then what's the point? Hey, whoa. We have statistics, we have probabilities, and we have odds, and we can look at those as well. That's what Vegas does. They're pretty successful. We can do this too. If we say ultimately and only, if I don't have a time machine, if I don't have a crystal ball, we might be able to predict, guess, use probability, statistics, and odds, but we don't know for sure. But all we can do is guess. Therefore, without knowing the consequence, that doesn't mean I'm always a consequential ethicist either. I'm definitely not a deontological ethicist, but I'm not always just a consequential ethicist either, because I think we have to also look at the intent. I'll come back to that. Again, bear with me. But ultimately only, we need a time machine or crystal ball. We don't have that, but we have probability and odds, and that's all we have. But that's something. Number two, all right, number two, compromises the purpose of life. What is the purpose of life? Well, number one, I'm going to say this. First time I'm going to bring this up, DNA. I think it is in our DNA. No different than the DNA of every animal out there in the world today, on Earth today. All animals have instincts, and they live based on their instincts. I think humans are no different. I think humans have instincts. And I think our instincts tell us the purpose of life, and that is to love, grow, and share. At some level within that framework, the purpose of everyone's life, everybody says, well, it depends on the person. Well, maybe regarding some arbitrary items within that framework, but of those three things, I think it's love, grow, and share. Okay? Love, grow, and share. Love as opposed, not hate. Two, to grow, to get better, to learn more, to get better, to improve, to better yourself. And three, to share. And I don't mean give away your possessions. I'm talking share your life with other people. We're a social being, on average. We're a social being. And I think we want to share our lives with other people. We want to share in the joy, we want to share in the pain. We want to share in all things with other people. I think it's pretty obvious that that is the purpose of our life as defined in our DNA. And I think it transcends all ethnicities, all of humanity, all people for all times. Number three is obstruct human choice and self-control. Now, that's providing those are actions that are innocent or benevolent and not malicious. Okay? So, yeah, obstructing someone who's going to do something heinous or life-threatening is different. In that standpoint, they should be, because then what they're doing is ultimately and only causing harm to oneself or another. They're compromising the purpose of life, which is to love, grow, and share. Therefore, I think morality can be defined by those three things. Now, religion has something to say about this as well. They have it properly defined. But I think if you take beyond religion, let's say religion doesn't exist. Let's say there is no religion out there today. And we want to look at human history, human behavior throughout history. I think we can come back and say that on average, people have said that if it ultimately and only causes harm to oneself or another, it's wrong. It's immoral. Right now someone's going, well, who's to decide that? I already said we'd have to wait for the consequence. We'd have to wait for the outcome. Does it ultimately only cause harm to oneself or another? Does it compromise the purpose of life? Is it hating? Someone says, well, I hate. Yeah, okay, hate. Yeah, all right. If we want to be that complicated, we can be. But yeah, love, grow, and share. Obstruct human choice and self-control. Everybody wants to have consent. Everybody does not want to be forced into anything. The use of force is almost always wrong. Except someone passes out on a railroad tracks, the railroad track's coming, you force them off the track because they probably did not necessarily consent to die. Maybe they did, maybe they didn't. You take them off, train goes by, you save their life. Okay. You obstructed human, but did they really have a choice? All right, just a weak quasi-example. All right, very good. So those are the three things that I think define morality, which then takes us back to ethics. So the question then becomes, is there a standard? Is there a standard that exists? What's a benchmark? I hear people all the time. I hear theologians say this. I say, well, what happens? I say to a theologian, or somebody for that matter, and I always get asked that, well, where do you stand? Where do you stand? Where do you stand? I'll get to that later. But ultimately it's this. If the almighty, powerful being, or God himself came down today and said, hey, let's say, for instance, I created you, but I had nothing to do with morality. Absolutely nothing to do with morality. Would that change who you are today? Would you go out and start behaving immorally? Would you all of a sudden go out and just murder? What if the laws stay in place? Would it change anything for you? I think not. I think morality is in our DNA. Now, how did it get there, you say? Someone's going to go, hey, how did it get there? How did it get there? Yep, got it. Been doing this a long time, been asked that many times. How did it get there? I don't know. Maybe a higher power. Maybe God. Maybe by genetics and evolution. I don't know. There are possibilities. The reality, however, is the fact that prior to spirituality, religion, etc., there was and has been social order, morality, altruism, teamwork, etc. How did it get there? I think it's in our DNA. I think it's overwhelmingly obvious that it's in our DNA. Now, again, I can't prove it. That sounds a little dogmatic, but I'm here to say, I don't know. But it does seem obvious to me because, again, patterns that exist and that have been there long-term, repetitively, are not there by coincidence. So somehow, some way, they are there. Which takes us to, which is going to be our next topic. Yes, I think DNA, I think our human behavior is in our DNA. I think it's genetic. I think we have predispositions, which is going to take us to nature versus nurture. And of these, within this topic is the idea that we think today, or we want to believe. Remember in the first part of class, we talked about people believe what they want to believe. Well, people also want to subsequently believe that they have control over everything. We want to think that we have control. We want to think that we have free will. Do we? I don't know. I'm not so sure. It's hard to prove. It's a tractionless topic. What do you mean tractionless? Well, it's really a question we can't really answer. People ask me, and I think sometimes we have free will from time to time, but not over time. Huh? What do you mean by that? Well, that's misleading. What do you pull your, be clear, man. Okay, hey, whoa. Give me a chance, would you? If you take a beach ball sitting on top of the water, you push that beach ball underneath the water. The will of that beach ball, or any ball that's inflated for that matter, the will of that ball is to come to the top and float. The minute I take my hand off that ball, the ball is going to come to the surface. No different than the phrase that the cream will always come to the top. So I can impose my will for a long time. The minute I stop imposing my will, I think what is meant to be will be. Therefore, yeah, it appears that we have free will from time to time, but not over time. So I'm not sure that we have the power and the strength to impose that will long-term, permanently, or all the time. Therefore, I question tremendously, and I'm not going to pander or be tribal and admit that and just fall into the fact that we just immediately and automatically have free will, because I think there are too many questions to be answered about whether or not we do have free will. I'm not just going to live in an echo chamber, practice confirmation bias, and just try to adhere to any one particular group. I'm going to simply say and be okay saying, I don't know that we do have free will over time. I'm not going to say that we have free will permanently, automatically, and perpetually. I'm just going to say, I don't know. I'm going to say there's a possibility that we don't. And even though we don't, or if we don't, we still have predispositions, we still have behaviors that are hardwired and pre-wired, predisposed in our DNA, and that can't be denied. If we look at the animal kingdom, we watch geese flying in a V pattern. They didn't go to Top Gun aviation school to learn how to fly in a V pattern. We have beaver. raised in captivity, released in the wild, immediately go out and start building dams and lodges. It's hardwired in their brain. They have instincts. Swallows come from Capistrano Valley to the Midwest and go back to Capistrano Valley in the fall by instinct. Humans are very similar. Even though we have these big frontal lobes, we too operate on instinct. We too have a lot of things pre-wired and have some knowledge that exists within and resides within that was never taught. And not everything is taught. Which brings me to the fact, or the idea, that we want to believe that we have control. So back to, I said that a little bit ago. We want to think we have control. It's a feel-good to think we have control. It sells, it works, it's functional to think we have more control than we do. Okay? Now, the idea that we have control is very powerful because the idea that we have control means that guess what we can do? We can blame somebody else. We can create this villain out here, this horrible, horrible, horrible human being, this horrible group, this horrible philosophy. And guess what? Hey, that's okay. This person's bad. Hey, that's okay. That's okay. Because guess what? I'm going to save the day. I'll save it all. I'll make it better for you, all right? Just pay me and I'll make it all go away. That concept right there is one of the reasons we have villains today. You can't really have a hero, all right? You can't have a protagonist without an antagonist. You can't have a hero unless there's a villain to save you from what? So it's very important, it's imperative to have a villain and create this villain. And remember before I talked about demagoguery, I talked about manipulation. I've talked about people using narratives and words and ideas and demagoguery to illustrate the response that they want. And why do they do that? A lot of times they want to create a villain. Why? Because there's profit. Because we are motivated by self-interest. And we're also very intelligent, we're very smart. But just as we're also very intelligent and very smart, there are a lot of people out there who are susceptible and who are easily controlled by the masses, by the powers that be. And if they can control those people, they can profit from it. And if they can profit from it, well, we all know what we do with profit. I think that's something you need to consider. The fact that there's profit today says that if someone can benefit or someone can profit, there's probably going to be an incentive. There's probably going to be an agenda. You're going to see demagoguery. You're going to see manipulation. Okay? It's going to happen. Sad but true, a lot of people are used today so that someone else may benefit. Now, unfortunately, I hate to pick on our politicians, but it is what it is. I must. People ask me about politics. Where do you stand on politics? I say, well, I think they're all bought and paid for. I think people are all motivated by self-interest. I think we're all on the same page. Everybody wants what they want. And we say, well, not all of them. I said, well, I said all of them. Well, don't you think that's an exaggeration to make a point? You should never say never or all. I said, well, yeah, probably you're right. I might be wrong. They certainly seem to be all bought and paid for. The best thing you can hope for is that the corruption falls in your favor. The best thing you can hope for is that the policies that be, the powers that be, are paid to vote for something that benefits all of us. I think that's the best you go for. That's pretty bleak. Yeah, unfortunately it is. How can you even smile, Bill? Yeah, I don't know. It's a good question. That's a really good question. How can I smile? How can I sit there and say that, they're bought and paid for? You know why? Because I think in the DNA of people, of humanity, there's still a lot of people that even though they benefit, it's still a win-win for a lot of people, depending on what it is. There's still some good things that come out of it. All right, how's that? Do I get a pass now? Am I a little more positive now? I mean, there's some good things that come out of it. But unfortunately, when I see the people today get just rabid and rampant about candidates and just go crazy and just act like they love them and the greatest thing on earth, I just go, ugh, you don't even know them. How do you know they're not bought and paid for? Hey, by the way, maybe they're not. Maybe I'm wrong. You know what? Maybe I've been duped. Maybe I'm delusional. Could be. I don't have all the answers. One of my favorite quotes of all time is from Socrates. He said, you know what? I'm a fool, but I know I'm a fool, and that makes me smarter than you. All right, let's stop right there. Next topic.